50. Okay, now it's live.
Greetings. Hello. Brian Nejmeh here. So excited to be with you today. Shout out and special thank you to all the Pittsburgh Product Camp volunteer staff, Greg Katikia, Mike Bauer, and our local host, JT. I think you guys have done a phenomenal job, and just can't say enough about what value I've already gotten out of the session, so thank you. INSTEP's a proud sponsor of Pittsburgh Product Camp. We are a boutique product management consulting firm offering advisory services to enterprise software companies. And today we're going to talk about some research we've been doing in the area of product management tools and how much they've come to influence the discipline of product management. Please feel free to post questions along the way. We are going to kind of take the questions up at the end of the session, but please feel free to post using the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of your screen. My background has really been in the enterprise software space for my whole career. I enjoy an adjunct professorship at Carnegie Mellon and the Masters of Science in Product Management program, a truly world-class opportunity for students to come into the discipline of PM. And I've done a lot of work in everything from early stage to mid-market to publicly held enterprise software companies. My roles have hovered around VP of Engineering, CTO, and product in general, and real excited to be here.
How's it going? My name is Al Nejmeh, and I'm a product manager at Optum Technology. I currently manage Optum's ambient intelligence platform in our advanced technology collaborative. In addition, I'm also Pragmatic Marketing Level 6 and Scrum Master Alliance Owner certified, and happy to be here today as well.
So to begin with, certainly you could make the case that product management has undergone major changes in the past 10 years. Perhaps the movement to the cloud, perhaps our focus on user experience, among other things, have all contributed to that. And certainly along the way, we see incredible movement in the area of product management tools. There are whole categories of tools like product analytics and CSM enablement that weren't even really in our vocabulary some 10 years ago. So we think the case could be made that product management itself is undergoing digital disruption. So if you think about the problem statement with all the companies that we work in, from early stage venture back to large publicly held, we see this interest within the product organization to ask the question, are we using the best tools and practices that are at our disposal? What does best in class look like? What tools are out there to sort of guide our product management practices? And really just an interest in a more objective point of view about the technologies that are out there. Certainly the pandemic has really, we've seen this surge in virtual teamwork. And when you think about virtual product management, you quickly realize that product management tools are central to effectively managing product teams in a virtual way. So to kind of introduce you to the overall framework, we set the stage by SaaS being a major thrust of what's sort of going on in the industry at large. And we think there are a number of drivers of SaaS that have dramatically impacted the discipline of product management. First, we certainly live in a world of agile, lean, discovery-based development paradigms, so that we're rapidly exploring and pivoting on new market opportunities. Secondly, we see that between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, we have major leverage points to begin building applications far beyond what we used to have. And so we can spend those scarce dev resources really building unique, differentiated capabilities in the application world, as opposed to focusing our energies on the basic infrastructure side of things. Certainly Azure and AWS chief among them as platforms in that respect. Thirdly, we see this intense focus on user experience. Perhaps because of the advent of all the mobile apps we use in our lives, we've gotten to the point where we expect enterprise apps to be very intuitive and very easy to use. And so we see this whole surge of UI UX within our discipline of product that is really, I would argue, born out of consumerism of the enterprise landscape. That is, we have to think more and more about our users through the lens of how they see their consumer experiences, and they're porting over to the enterprise application experiences they have. We certainly are driving market adoption through those lenses as well. Certainly, we see that we are focused on multi-cloud enabled environments and an intense focus on user data. So tools like Pendo and Gainsight drive huge insights about how products are being used by our users and how they inform future product roadmaps. Our multi-cloud environments are critical in terms of product managers worrying about gross margin and the economics and business case of products we're building. And finally, CSM, or customer success management, major influence on upsell and land expand strategies, and tools like Gainsight that are out there to help promote our understanding as product people in that respect. So with that in mind, we at INSTEP have been developing with a bunch of colleagues, really in a number of different companies, the model we've come to call 5PMM, the 5 product movements model of the SaaS Product Manager. And I'm briefly going to go over this because our whole tenet of our tools taxonomy is grounded in this idea of a product management lifecycle. You see a lot of PM tools out there that are just flat lists, and we argue that you have to understand PM tools in the context of a lifecycle model to really get the most value out of them and to understand how they relate to each other. So in that spirit, we think of 5 movements of a SaaS product manager. Movements has their origin in the idea of an orchestra and a conductor who is managing the movements of music over time through a musical composition, much like the movements of a product manager or how a product come to life. So the first movement is strategy, where you're defining, if you will, the North Star. That is, what is our destination? Certainly April's session this morning on positioning informed strategy and what are we uniquely qualified to own as a space. And so that's certainly what strategy is about. Planning is the idea of defining the notch marks along the way to get there. And we'll see that there are a lot of tools and practices along the way here. Development is PM's role in helping development bring products to life. This is around story elaboration, data modeling, workflow, wireframing, and the like live here. And then certainly marketing, that is raising awareness and creating qualified demand through social posts, through understanding our reputations online and other vehicles. Again, product marketing owns this, but product management has an influence on it. And then finally, probably my favorite area and where product has so blossomed the past couple of years is operations. That is fulfilling on the original promise of why did the customer buy our product? That is, what business value realization goals did they have, and has our product helped them achieve those goals? So they are the 5 movements of product that we are going to frame our tools taxonomy around. So with that in mind as a backdrop, the taxonomy has as its purpose a high-level organizing model of how to understand the tools that exist across the product management lifecycle and the relationships among them. In this context, the tool is either a product like a Pendo or a Gainsight or a HA, or an information service like Gartner, Sirius Decisions, or even CB Insights that provide information content relevant to product managers. But left on their own, as you see on the left, this just looks like a flat list of tools that aren't really rationalized into a product management lifecycle. So if you marry that list of tools into a product management lifecycle, you have the outcomes that we're driving at in this work. which is a consistent and common terminology to facilitate understanding of tools, to understand the relationships between tools. That is, how does a strategy tool like Sophion relate to a product planning tool like Jira? And what should you expect those integrations to be between those tools? Also, by looking at tools through a life cycle model, we can find gaps that exist in tools and certainly can aid in understanding what the gaps are in an organizational use of product management tools. And the diagram you see on the right, Al is going to build out in much further detail as the talk goes on. So what we've done is we've taken the 5 product movements and we've classified 300 plus product management tools into this taxonomy. And you might say, how did this all come about? Well, like all good things or many good things, they come about over musing over a fine glass of wine. So Al and I were having a glass of wine together one night, and we were talking about the 5 PMM model, and we began to etch into his role every day as a product manager. And I began to realize that as a digital native person, a younger PM tends to think much more instinctively about tools as the way to get product management done. So he rattled off Pendo and Jira and Balsamic and all these tools that sort of were central to his day in the life of as a product manager. And I began to realize that probably younger product managers had more of a digital product management tools mindset to the job. And so began our journey into kind of chronicling the tools that are out there in product management. Al and his peer group of younger PMs have certainly informed that, as well as my own knowledge of what's out there in the space, and looking at a variety of tools like the product stack from Pendo and their annual taxonomy of tools that are out there. We did about a dozen customer discovery calls with senior product people to understand the tools that drove their product management organizations. And then we've done a number of product management engagements with clients where they've informed us of what tools they're using through a proprietary product management tool survey instrument we've been developing. And then I monitor a bunch of sites in my role with a private equity firm and in my venture capital work. I get weekly postings on recently funded companies, many of whom are PM in nature. And so every week we're adding more and more tools to our landscape. Final comment is that there are many tools that span multiple movements. So Pendo, Aha, Rally, Gainsight, you can't pigeonhole them in one movement, but multiple movements. And we recognize that as well. So I'm going to hand off to Al now to kind of do a more detailed look at the taxonomy.
So depicted in the pentagon on the right is the PM tools taxonomy represented through the pentagon, and each of the 5 sides of the pentagon correlates to the 5 movements, and the subsequent layers underneath those movements are the tool categories that make up that movement. So in the next 15 or so minutes here, I'm going to go through each of these tool categories, and it'll be pretty rapid. It's a lot of content to cover in 15 minutes, and the expectation isn't that everyone grasps everything at the same time. We've blogged about this quite a lot. I think this video will also be available on YouTube. And then if you're interested in more of the specific tools that we go over, feel free to email myself or Brian at the end, and we have our contact information. So in looking at strategy, and again, this is defining the destination, where you're going as a product. So here we have strategy and category analysis. So tools to support SWOT analysis, vision definition, goals, objectives, related, strategy product offerings, really that executive kind of level roll up, and tools to exemplify this are Achieve IT and Sophion. And as I go through here, I'll name tools for each of the tool categories. They're merely just examples. They're not recommendations or endorsements. They're just examples that I'm personally familiar with and I think some of you might be familiar with as well. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but really PM tool selection is finding what specifically is the right fit for you. Are you a startup company looking to invest in some open source tools for the first time, just to kind of grab your bearings in the PM world, or are you looking for more a sophisticated tool like Appendo, things like that? Next up is ideation. So ideation process management tools, including customer, sales, employee processing software. How do you crowdsource idea generation? AHA has a pretty cool portal that does this. You can simply submit an idea and people can upload it or download it accordingly. Bright Idea as well as another example in this category. Portfolio management, so overall management of multiple product lines, including AKRs, budgets, resource tracking, things of that nature. You have, as a PM, you have a bucket of money associated to yourself, and how do you go about divvying that up and making sure that where you're investing those capital dollars are going to the results that you desire, and how do you track that? PlanView is a tool that I'm pretty familiar with in that respect. Up next is market analysis, so market sizing, market intelligence tools, and market funding news. And then, as Brian mentioned earlier, this can either be a tool, the way that we are classifying it is either a news service or a software. So on the news service side, you have things like CB Insights or Serious Decisions. On the software side, I believe HubSpot's Marketing Hub is really a fantastic tool to use. Next up is customer journey mapping. So tools to facilitate the discovery and documentation of the customer journey. So how do you really kind of define the different pain points that your customers experiences throughout the product? What are they thinking, feeling, and doing throughout this process, from going from deciding to investigate a product to actually purchasing it, and kind of mapping that out? Tools to facilitate this, I think CX Omni is really kind of the leading tool there. Competitive analysis, kind of off of April's discussion earlier today, which I thought was really fantastic. So tools to understand and position against the competition. It's constantly evolving in the SaaS world, constantly changing. This kind of happens throughout a variety of different lenses. CI Radar being one of them is kind of unique in that they essentially send you a daily email of certain updates that your competitor's doing during particular time periods. And lastly is business modeling. So tools for business planning, modeling, and pricing. On the pricing side, a tool like Visitar, I think it is pretty common. On the planning side, you can build lean model canvases with a tool called Strategizer. So those are kind of examples there. Next up, going into planning tools. So we've set the strategy, right? We've defined the destination. Now we're putting the markers down and planning out how we're going to get there. And then looking at planning, personas is really the first thing that comes to mind. So tools to support the definition of pain points, value realizations for not only on the buyer side, but the user side, decision makers, influencers, things of that nature, really getting that customer snapshot and how do you articulate that. User Forwards and Versium are some tools that I'm fairly familiar with in that respect. Up next is integration. So tools to support the integration and application into other data integrations and API management. How do you take these different systems and make sure that there's still a single user experience? MuleSoft and Metallion are some examples there. Feature definition and prioritization. I'm sure this is, a lot of, me personally, and I know, those listening as a PM, this is where you spend a lot of your time. So tools for capability and feature definition and prioritization. Think of this as, your AHAs or Trellos, things of that nature. Product release planning or product planning. So tools to develop and schedule, program increments, sprints, product releases. So, based on velocity and the scope of what's expected to be delivered, we think that this, feature or capability will be delivered during this time frame. Again, kind of tools, here, Rally or the Atlassian suite of products as well. And lastly, road mapping. So tools for producing a roadmap, based off of features and projected delivery times. Again, sophisticated tool like AHA, has a lot of those capabilities. I've also seen people just using, simply MS PowerPoint for this as well. And so we've defined the destination, right? We've, defined the markers on how we're going to get there. Now we're going to bring the product to life and build it. And that's what happens here in development. So those that are, maybe product owners or technical product managers, you might find yourself spending time a lot more in this area. So looking at data modeling, so tools for producing data models and software, how are systems connecting, architecture diagrams, Lucidchart, I think, is a good example of this, and MS Visio has been around for quite some time as well. Prototyping and visualization, so tools for producing UI, UX, and navigational models. How do you, create these mock-ups and collaborate, with your UX resources? And Balsamic, something that I'm familiar with. It's something quick, so you can just kind of gather things quickly and consult with UX. Adobe InDesign is a little bit more intensive on some of the design aspects. Axure, another one. Workflow, so tools for producing business process and workflow models. So really, how do you kind of map out authorization and saying, all right, this person is able to view this page and this page, but not this page, or certain accesses and things like that, or simply, what is the mapped out way for how the user is going to navigate through a particular site or application. Again, Lucidchart, Visio, kind of common players here. Agile and project management, and this is, arguably one of the biggest and kind of fastest growing areas, but tools for agile and project management. This is, including estimation, scheduling, tracking, managing project content, deadlines and schedules. How are you tracking these user stories, the velocity, and then reporting on your metrics of for how quickly you are building. Jira, Airtable, Asana, Monday.com recently starting getting into the mix. So a lot of players here. Internationalization, so tools to facilitate the localization, internationalization, and translation of getting into foreign markets and being able to make sure that you are kind of properly assimilating into that market. So localize and transperfect are some examples there. And lastly is internal collaboration and communication. And again, with virtual, we're kind of becoming to the forefront here. This is really an up and coming tool category. So tools to facilitate internal coordination and communication across, the distributed text and video share workspaces. I think of Slack, Microsoft Teams, FlowDoc, Cisco, or Citrix. So there's a lot of kind of players there. And then marketing. So again, we've kind of built the product. We're bringing it to life. And now what we're doing is creating awareness and demand. So first is customer segmentation, tools to support the segmentation and understanding of customers for targeted marketing campaigns, upselling and cross-selling. So if you want to segment your customers for specific campaigns, this is a way in which you define that to be able to do targeted campaigns that might be more successful for one segmentation than another. Examples of this are Segment and Marketo. Outbound marketing, so tools to support outbound marketing. This is everything from social media to product launch to email campaigns, things of that nature. All your social medias fall up in this category: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Sprout Social is kind of a cool tool that wraps all of those together. So those are kind of some of the players there. Aweber as well. And lastly is reputation management. And again, with the rise of things like Yelp and Capterra and things like that, people are constantly evaluating your company and giving reviews. And how do you support your online management of the company, product, and reputation? Google reviews, again, so there's constant evaluation, and how do you monitor that? And tools like Yext and G2 are some good players there. Lastly, so once we've created awareness of demand, now we're fulfilling the promise within our operations tools. first, looking at CX management and revenue optimization, tools to promote customer success, customer, experience, customer retention, NPS, customer value realization. Really, how do you improve the overall customer experience and revenue? This can be something like a gain site, or Churn Zero is another one to mention. Those are a company that really looks at and evaluates the potential that's for subscription-based products, the likelihood that that individual is going to renew their subscription. Onboarding, demos, and training. This is, again, a very kind of new area. Pendo is kind of a great, great example for this one. Also, looking at something as simple as a QuickTime. I know personally at Optum, sometimes we just create QuickTime demo videos. Looking for something a little bit more sophisticated, you might use Camtasia. And UX testing and product rollout. So tools for experimentation, personalization, feature flagging, tag management, all of those, sorts of things. A/B testing. So if you are at college and you want to test the likelihood of changing a donate button from green to yellow, and what that interaction could turn into in terms of additional donation dollars, and testing that out on every fourth user, that's kind of what we're getting at here. So tools to do this. LaunchDarkly, I think, is pretty well known in the industry. Split.io as well. Next up is product analytics, so tools to collect and analyze from all aspects of this customer journey. So analyzing, users that are constantly visiting the site, and their interaction within the site, things that they're doing, things that they're not doing. Something on the high end is a Pendo, again, kind of a great player in this industry. If you're a startup, kind of experiencing this for the first time, Google Analytics is a great way to do this as well. So a couple of different tools to choose from there. Customer and user knowledge management. So tools to promote customer knowledge and information. So think of that live pop-up window that comes when you first enter a site that's asking if you have any questions, or after you fill out a form, they're sending you another email about, hey, was this helpful, and please rate this. So Zendesk, I think, is a good example here. And lastly is business intelligence. So being able to analyze, visualize, and aggregate user information. Think of a Splunk or a Tableau, Power BI, to name a few. So lastly, we just want to talk about some use cases throughout our experience here at INSTEP that we've had so far. And the first being a company PM tools assessment. So we've developed a survey which goes over each of these 5 movements and the subsequent tool categories, based off of usage, frequency of that usage, common practices, overall satisfaction. And based off the answers to that survey, we're able to create a heat map or a health chart to be able to kind of depict, areas for, where investment might be needed, or areas where investment might not be needed from a PM tools lens. In addition, doing some company PM tools education. So now that we know these are some of your strengths and some of your weaknesses within the PM tools taxonomy, how do we specifically educate on best practices and use cases for these tools? And that's something we've been doing as well. Kind of a future state, and something we're currently evaluating in discussions with a few folks with, is identifying an industry-wide state of PM tools usage. So being able to survey the entire product management industry to see what their use of PM tools are and what that looks like. And lastly, it could be used as a merger and acquisition mechanism in evaluating certain companies and seeing where there could be synergies or differences to be able to accurately predict a possible merger and acquisition. So that's a little bit of an overview of the use cases. I'm going to send it back to Brian now, and for some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Al. A number of you have sent privately in the public chat about the list of tools, and Al and I are happy to provide those. If you just email us, we'll put the curated list together of the names of the tools and all the categories, and give you URLs so you can look at them in more detail. Another question that we've heard pretty frequently, and I thought I would just sort of offer up some perspective, but also open other questions that you might have. But there's another question here about if you had to pick 3 PM tools to start with, what would they be and why? I think this is a really good question. And I guess if it were me, it would depend on a lot of things, but 3 I would pick. One, in the planning area, I would pick a tool like a Jira or a Trello, something to sort of guide and direct the interface between product management and development, just to make sure we're staying on track and being informed, number one. I think a second tool I would pick would probably be a wireframing tool like Balsamic, real low cost. And the reason is that'll allow me to interface with customers and get feedback about potential new features and new ideas. And I think that would be valuable. And then the third thing would be probably a tool in the customer success management, product analytics area, a Google Analytics with tagging and/or a Pendo or a Gainsight. Reason being that we live in a world where we want to have a lot of product telemetry and an understanding of how our users are using product, and those tools give us a lot of those insights. So they would be my list of 3. Al, wondering how you feel about that.
No, I think those are good points. I think, another thing that we've talked about, and we're actually currently working on a blog to post pretty shortly here about, the PM tools for the open source product manager or startup product manager, and how can you use a list of pretty cheap tools underneath maybe $1,000, aggregate, to be able to go about, getting a PM tool suite that you can use and fairly effectively. I think it goes back to, really, are you going to use Pendo for product analytics, or are you going to use, the open source Google Analytics? And I think, as you mature as a company and your, capital investment becomes available to, invest in those more sophisticated tools, those are certainly kind of areas to then explore. But I think really starting to look at being able to assess where you are from a product management maturity perspective, as well as being able to look at the capital that you have to invest, because I think then that can kind of dictate areas where you can see that investment.
Al, Roxanne has a real good question. She says, when Al mentioned creating a heat map to show where companies may want to invest in tooling, what tool do you like to use for heat mapping, and what are some things out there that you've had some experience with?
So right now for heat mapping, essentially we've just developed a pretty simple algorithm within Excel, which just kind of, it's a pretty binary on a variety of categories. So usage, frequency of usage, common practices. We do pull that information from SurveyMonkey, which, is how we get that information from our clients. And then that translates into Excel for the algorithm to then produce a heat map there. So I wouldn't say we use a specific heat map tool, but if Roxy, if you have any recommendations, I would love to hear them as well.
Great. Any other questions that people have? Just checking in with the audience out there. Please feel free to send them in the Q&A tab to us. And if not, certainly the thing we would encourage y'all to do is to take a look at the presentation online and kind of go forward with that. We got another one here from John Callan. Hello, John. I love the deep dive in the relationship with the products in terms of the 5 movements. I couldn't help but think there's many of these are really applicable to multiple stakeholders and competencies within a software organization. Your perspective on the top 3 questions, giving your perspective on the top 3 tools could unite the broad stakeholders in the process of software planning and development, that would be helpful. John, this is a really good point. I think the whole idea of stakeholdership and how we build stakeholdership. You could argue one of the major jobs of product is to build stakeholdership among the executive ranks. And I think tools help with visualizing and being more transparent in what decisions you are making as a team. And so, it definitely is the case that I think tools can help inform and mature those processes. And, for a lot of organizations we work with, even those that you think are quite mature, I think what we've observed is how immature their technology and tools are to guide PM. We've been in companies that are hundreds of $millions in annual recurring revenue and have the Microsoft Office suite guiding them. And there really aren't any of these, what I come to call purpose-built product management tools in the mix. And so I think that's a real lost opportunity, but I love your lift up about stakeholdership and developing stakeholdership, especially across the business, sales, marketing, finance, and the marketing and sort of technology side of the house. Okay.
Hi, Brian. We have one more question from Connie in chat. For those that use agile management tools, what do you prefer, Jira, Rally, or others?
So I think this really depends on a couple things. I think Jira has some great they're part of the Atlassian suite of products. There's some great opportunities for integration. And I think that is something that is very valuable. It can integrate, I think, upwards, to AHA, and then so you're able to look at, something on strategy and be able to tie that to a specific user story that's being developed. So I think that's really cool. I think on the Rally side, I'm familiar with that as well, and actually have used that and currently use that at Optum. I think they also have some integrations, within AHA as well. I believe Jira has about 90% of the market share within the agile project management kind of like software development. So I just think that they have a little bit more on the integration side. But again, if you're just if you're looking to just get started for the first time, I think Trello is a great kind of free trial open source tool to use as well. But I would recommend Jira. For my experience.
JT, want to lift up one other area that I think is really novel and I think important. It goes by the general name of feature tagging and tools in this category, Split.io, LaunchDarkly, among others. I think really, really nice tools, and the idea of being able to do A/B testing, or maybe more importantly, having a common code base that certain customers get certain features is another use case I've seen of these technologies. And so I think real important in that area. And while more of a technology-oriented tool, I think it's so important for product management to be aware of these tools and what I call the art of the possible. The fact that we can do rapid A/B testing, the fact that we can do phased rollout, and all these things come back to having technologies like the ones we just talked about. Another good question here from Greg Katikia. How do you suggest we separate enhancement requests from bug fixes all in Jira or as in separate databases? Al, is that something you want to speak to? I certainly have some thoughts about that. I know you've sort of dealt with that in some ways too.
Yeah, I think, personally, I would continue to track it within Jira or whatever project management tool that you're using, because then I think you have an easier path to look at a high level assessment of, okay, this is the percent of tech debt or bug fixes that we're addressing on this sprint or in this release. And I think sometimes when let's say you track maybe issues in GitHub, and everything else in Rally, you lose sight sometimes of where your kind of development investment is. So my advice would be to keep it, wherever your majority of project management is.
Really nice to see, by the way, some of the chat going on and you all sharing some of your own experiences. I see Connie and others sort of talking about that and really like that a lot. So it's just a rich area, a lot going on in the tools arena. I have to say there are times where in a given week, we've got 330 tools now in our little database, and in a given week, I might be adding 10 to 20 tools. So a lot of new investment going on in this area, and a lot of activity. So all good stuff. And Ralph, thanks for your feedback too about a unified way to track enhancements and bugs and how important that is. Good insight there as well. So. Well, we're real excited about the level of response we've gotten, and a number of you have asked about, what's going to be made available. We'll put together a list of the tools that we've talked about or now mentioned in this presentation by movement, and the URLs listed there. We'll get those together. Also would encourage everybody to connect to Al Nejmeh and myself, Brian Nejmeh, on LinkedIn. We do a lot of blogging. There's a blog on the 5 product movements model there. Not too long ago, Al did a blog not long ago on the tools taxonomy. He's working on another blog about open source product toolkits for startups, and always kind of thinking about, what does the readership want to know about. And I'm real excited, by the way, if any of you have ideas about this industry-wide PM tools assessment we want to do to get the word out there. Certainly plan to collaborate with my close colleague, Greg Katikia, on that as well, because we think a state-of-the-art of what's going on and state of practice in PM tools for the industry would be good. Thanks so much for the session. And JT, thanks again to you, Greg, awesome job. And Mike Bauer, shout out once again. Awesome. Thanks for making this happen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for doing.
Thanks. Good seeing you, everybody.